Hi, I'm Sharon, the owner of Beads and More, located in Woodbury, Connecticut. And let's start beading. Okay, now we're ready to crimp. You've checked your bracelet for sizing and you have it right. So go ahead, remove one side, your bead stopper. And what you're going to do is string on the crimp bead. Now, this crimp bead is a 2x2, 2mm by 2mm, sterling silver. I do like to use the sterling silver. Crimps nice, holds well. And you're going to put that on, and then you're going to put on half of your clasp. Okay, so we've got half of our magnetic clasp, and we're going to string that on after the crimp. So what you want to do is go over the clasp and through the crimp, and then you're going to string it through a couple of beads. So I'm through the crimp right now. See where the wire's coming up? And now I'm going to string the wire through a couple of more beads. And after you have it through about 3, 4, 5 beads, you can go ahead and take the slack out of the wire. You're going to pull the wire and remove the slack. Now, if the wire doesn't pull easily, you may have to move the crimp down a little and then pull. Now, you really want to pull all the slack out so that your clasp, half your clasp, will still rotate and that it's not too stiff. But you don't want any excess wire in here. Now the first side, you don't have to worry about the whole rest. It's the second half that's going to be most important to take away all the slack. So once you have it, your crimp close up to your clasp, you're ready to crimp. So the first step of crimping will be to use this back section of the crimp pliers. The crimping plier has two sections to it, the front and a back. And in that back section there's a little divot on the top middle. The back section is what we're going to use first. That's the first step of the crimp. We're going to align this crimping plier into the crimp, into that back section. Now I do want to point out that since we are using a magnetic clasp, it is a little challenging because the magnet is pulling to the plier. It's well worth the extra effort to keep that magnet away and get a nice crimp, because it's so much easier to put on a magnetic bracelet. So we're going to align that crimp into the second groove. We're going to make sure that we're nicely aligned front and back. So go ahead and check it. Okay. So you can see, if you look on each side of the tool, my crimp is completely centered into that second groove. And you should do that. You should look at each side and make sure that you're nicely in that second groove. And then you're going to give a firm squeeze down one time, nice and strong, down, press, then release. Now this is what you want to see. You're looking at the crimp now that has a divot down the middle, so it looks like a wave. There's a valley in the middle, and that's the first step of the crimp. So after you've done your first step of the crimp, look at it. This is what you want it to look like. If you see a bump and then flat, that's a bad crimp. So basically what happened was we strung our beads, we put on the crimp, we put on half our clasp, we went over the clasp through the crimp, and when we did that, through that crimp we now have 2 strands of wire. And when we press down on the crimp using the crimp plier, that little divot came between those 2 wires. So it's very important that when you string back through the crimp, over the clasp, through the crimp, that your wire is laying side by side. You don't want your wires to be crossed. And you want that divot to come down in between those 2 wires and form this little valley in between them. I'm going to show you a bad crimp because this is important to know. If it is bad, you want to redo it because a bad crimp is not going to hold your piece together. This is a bad crimp, first step of a crimp. There's a bump and then it's flat. It's a little hard to see because it is sterling and it is shiny, but basically there's one hump and then it goes flat and you don't have that nice valley. On the other side of this demo string, I do have, again, the good crimp, first step of a crimp, which has that bump there in the middle. 2 bumps, goes down in the middle.